Orange County Mayor Jerry Demings is officially launching his campaign for Florida governor, but there is already another Democrat in the race, former Florida Congressman David Jolly. I'm News 6 anchor Lisa Bell. I sat down one-on-one with Jolly to get his reaction to Demings' announcement and hear his vision for Florida, starting with his plans for Florida's education system. How do you fix that, and how do you fix that quickly? Because when you have young children, you don't have time. You don't have 5 years to wait for the schools to turn around.
Yeah, look, school choice is popular because families are dissatisfied with the current offerings, but I'm afraid they're dissatisfied because Republican leaders, frankly, in Tallahassee, have attacked public education for 20 years. We have starved public education of resources. Still today, the greatest access to excellence in academics, the trades, and the arts are in our public schools. But you have a teacher today doing what was 3 jobs 10 years ago. And so I talk about tackling this problem in several different ways. First, we need a 10-year renaissance in public education funding. Funding, meaning should we take some of our tourist development tax money that comes in from out of state, spend it on 10 years of improving public education. Our teachers are paid dead last in the nation. Dead last. It's a moral wrong. I don't care your voter registration. The fact that our public school teachers in the 3rd largest state are paid dead last is wrong. How do we get them a 30% pay raise, get more teachers, higher quality teachers, those who have dedicated their careers to education to remain in our public schools? How do we create public education environments that families want to rush into, right? We have some great schools, but some are 60 to 80 years old with portables and trailers in the back as classrooms with leaky window air conditions and a dusty field as a playground. So of course Florida's families are going to rush into a choice environment. So first, let's invest in public education. Let's create more resource officers, more teaching slots, smaller classrooms, better conditions, platforms of learning for the future that Florida's families want. And then what we should say to the voucher school, and I say this to my fellow Democrats, we should not oppose choice just to oppose choice. It's popular. But the crisis that is going to happen in the next 20 years is this. A choice school today does not have to teach your kid to read. A choice school today does not have to teach your kid to read. If your 1st grade kid can't read, they get to kick them out. They take the $8,500 and they send your kid back to public school. If your child's on the spectrum, they don't have to take him. Has a disability, they don't have to take her. Your kid doesn't have to have access to excellence in academics. Say trigonometry in 10th grade, access to the arts or trades. Our choice schools don't have to do that. So what I say as the next governor would be a 10-year renaissance in funding of public education. Invest again in public education. Create an environment that Florida's families want to rush into. And then for our voucher schools, if you're going to participate in the voucher program, you should have to provide the same services, standards, academics, access to the arts and trades that our public schools do. That begins to say, look, we accept that public and private schools are education partners to Florida's families, but if we're going to use public dollars, you should have to provide the same services.
What type of additional funding are you talking about, and where does that money come from?
Yeah, look, I think every time, virtually every time across the state of Florida, when we put a question in front of voters, let voters decide, should we invest more money in public education? Pretty much writ large, voters say yes. If I know it's going into public education, to pay teachers more, to provide safety and security against gun violence in our public schools, local communities will either vote to tax themselves through sales or a millage or whatever it might be. I actually think we should look at our tourist development tax dollars, and here's why. Look, nobody's going to try to soften the tourist industry. It's one of the economic drivers, one of the main 3, tourism, ag, and construction. But right now, we require our tourist tax dollars to be used only for tourism, to build convention centers, to advertise tourism in Chicago in the winter. It makes sense, but we don't have a crisis of convention centers. We have a crisis of public education. So let's put a question in front of voters. Should we spend the next 10 years taking some of our tourist development tax money and invest it in excellence in public education while we reform and increase the standard requirements on our choice schools?
So are you talking about a referendum or a constitutional amendment, or
Sure.
just passing a law? I mean, can you just do this in the state legislature?
We could do it through the state legislature, but I'm not opposed to giving Florida's voters a voice in this. I think that's the way democracy should work, and I'm confident Florida's voters would say, we're desperate for a better funded, higher quality, more accountable public education system. Here's the most important thing. Our teachers are already trying to do it. It's the politicians who have gotten in the way from Tallahassee. Most of our local politicians are trying to do it as well. But we have failed to invest in the quality of teachers we currently have.
Okay, let's talk about the election results from last night. Some big wins for Democratic candidates in Virginia, New Jersey, New York City mayor, and even out in California. What is your reaction to that?
Change is here, and Florida's next. Florida's next. People are screaming for change. We're in the midst of an affordability crisis across the country. In Florida, it manifests itself through access to housing. Young people or families trying to afford rent. Longtime homeowners whose insurance bills have gone up. Utilities, where our own utility down in South Florida has requested the highest rate increase in American history, not Florida history. The price of car insurance is going up. The cost of getting to work is going up because of transportation. And so we have an affordability crisis that incumbents are not listening to. They are just ignoring voters. We've heard this. I've now done 113 community events. I don't care if you're a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent. If you live in Nocatee or Naples or Pensacola or Miami, Winter Haven, Winter Park, or Orlando, the affordability crisis is hitting everybody. That's what we saw in the results. And I would suggest to you, my Republican friends in Tallahassee have had 30 years to address it. And the reason that this race is so tight is because voters are disenchanted by Republican leaders in Tallahassee. I think democratic values are bigger than our party, but they are rested in our party. The economy should work for everybody. The government has a responsibility in our lives to provide for access to health care, to excellence in education. And frankly, we need to be a state that once again is a home for everybody, regardless of the color of your skin, where you were born, who you love, or who you worship. That is a new agenda in Florida, and that is why we can win this race.
How do you make housing more affordable?
Oh, listen, we have several different ways to tackle it just through policies that my Republican friends could do. I think we need a state catastrophic fund to remove hurricane coverage from the private market altogether, create a state sovereign wealth fund. If we do that, we can cut homeowners insurance by 60 or 70%. If we actually let local municipalities determine how to zone and develop, how they address the cost of rents through affordable and workforce housing, if the state were to just provide more resources to affordable and workforce housing, we can reduce the cost of rents as well, access to housing for the workforce, people in certain occupations, certain income groups. All of these policies are available. My Republican friends won't do it because they don't want the government to be more involved. I simply know that people want to see the cost of housing driven down. We can do that. We can reduce property taxes for homeowners, and as Democrats, we should be willing to step into that space as well.
What is your reaction to at least the current plan that some House Republicans have put out to reduce property taxes? The governor has said that's not good, but what is your proposal?
I'm not sure my Republican friends in Tallahassee know exactly what their plan is. They've offered 8 different ones because they're really uncertain. Governor DeSantis' plan is just repeal all property taxes, which would defund our police, defund transportation, clean water, clean air, defund education. Governor DeSantis has not suggested where that additional revenue would then come from. So what I do say to my Democratic friends and to voters is let's see what Republicans offer. We shouldn't just reflexively oppose whatever the other side of the aisle offers. If it makes sense, if the math works, then let's work with them on it. If it doesn't, then we won't be with Republicans on that issue. But as Democrats, we need to lead. Here's one thing I know what we need. We need first-time home buyer tax relief. Right now, for longtime homeowners, we have Save Our Homes and portability. It's good public policy. We did it because longtime homeowners were struggling to stay in their homes in the run-up of values in the 2000s. Now we have the inverted problem. A first-time home buyer buys a home from a 20-year homesteader, their second-year tax bill jumps by 200, 300, 400%, and that is unsustainable. That first-time home buyer is hit with an insurance policy and taxes that outweigh the cost of their mortgage. So let's be the party that leads with first-time home buyer tax relief. A homestead exemption of $150,000 or $200,000, or maybe a 3, 4, 5 year step up in taxable value of a home for a first-time home buyer. We can lead with that, and we should, where we can find tax relief that still ensures revenue for services. Let's do it. Let's pursue it.
This week, there is a new name that has now joined the race for governor in the Democratic primary, Orange County Mayor Jerry Demings. He's very well known, certainly here in Central Florida.
Sure.
What is your reaction to this new competitor?
I wish Jerry Demings well. He has had a very distinguished and long career. His decision to run for governor is a personal decision, I'm sure, for he and Val, and I anticipate he will get out there and speak to voters just like I am. His decision is inconsequential to the task ahead of me. I got into this race 4 months ago knowing that my job was to reach every voter across this state, Republican, Independent, and Democrat, with ideas to tackle the affordability crisis and end the culture wars, end up in a place where Florida welcomes everybody once again. I presume Jerry will have that conversation as well, but his decision is inconsequential to mine.
You mentioned culture wars. With that said, really in the past 2 decades, and certainly since 2016, I would say, the state has really shifted even more to the right.
Sure.
What makes you think that this year will be any different, or 2026 will be any different?
Yeah, I don't know what is right and left politically these days. The party I used to belong to when I was a Republican in Congress thought we should stay out of your bedroom and your library and your doctor's office, and now that seems to be all Republicans in Tallahassee want to do. I don't know if that's a lurch to the right or to the left, but I think it's an imposition on people's personal freedoms. We used to want to grant civil and personal liberties to people regardless of the color of their skin or who they loved, and that's not what I'm hearing from Republican friends now. So I don't really care what's left or right. What I know is there are enough voters in Florida who are crippled by an affordability crisis and exhausted by culture wars and just want a return to what Lawton Chiles and Bob Graham used to refer to, the responsible administration of the state government. That is a coalition bigger than the Democratic Party. But it amplifies the Democratic Party, right? The economy should work for everybody. The government should help with health care and education, and everybody should be welcome. Those are our democratic values, but they're so much bigger. So yes, it appears we will have a Democratic primary. I will speak to every Democratic voter across the state, but I'm also speaking to every independent and Republican voter, because I'm not just trying to be a governor for Democrats. I'm trying to be a governor for every Floridian.
Jerry Demings has called on Governor DeSantis to help out with the federal government shutdown and millions of Floridians losing their SNAP benefits or WIC benefits. Do you think the state government has any type of role in what's happening right now, and certainly with food insecurity and food benefits?
Yes, we need to spend more money to ensure direct access to food programs and health care in the state of Florida. 50% of our state does not have 2 weeks worth of savings to handle a crisis, either the ability to afford food or the ability to afford health care or a car repair. 50% of our state is being left behind. And so I worry, in the face of all of the cuts from Republican leaders in Tallahassee and Washington, we are a state, as voters, we are going to have to decide, what are we going to do about rural health care deserts? What are we going to do to ensure that people have access to health care in a state that refuses to expand Medicaid? What are we going to do to ensure access to food security programs? If you're part of that 50% without savings, it is an emergency. I think it is good that Mayor Demings has done that, and I hope within his authorities at the county level, he will find a way to do it himself and not just put it all on our governor.
Is there anything that I did not ask you about that you would want to touch on or comment on right now?
I would just say that we saw dramatic change in New Jersey and Virginia and across the country this week, and Florida's next. Florida's voters are screaming for change, and we're building a campaign to meet that moment.
I feel like we hear that every election cycle from Democrats in Florida.
Yeah.
And New Jersey's a blue state. Virginia's way more purple than Florida. So I think a lot of Florida Democrats are still very pessimistic that this state will actually turn blue.
Yeah, let's unpack that a little bit, because you could say New Jersey is a blue state, but you can also say that the voters swung by double digits towards Democrats last night. In Virginia, they had a Republican governor, and the voters swung in double digits towards Virginia Democrats. In the congressional special elections this year in Florida, the Space Coast, the Panhandle, Florida's voters swung towards Democrats by 15 or 16 points. Not just Democratic voters, Republicans and independents. So this is a moment of change. look, in 22, we heard a lot of leading Democrats. Charlie Crist and Val Demings were on the ballot. They lost by 18 and 16 because Florida Democrats were not in a position to win that cycle because Florida's voters had decided, you know what, we're good with where we're at. This cycle, Florida's voters are screaming for change. And so it is, yes, part of being a strong enough candidate, building a strong enough campaign, but it's also about a cycle where voters have said enough is enough. I don't care if you're a Republican, Independent, or Democrat. You feel the division. You're exhausted by the culture wars. You feel the economic anxiety, not just for the unemployed person economically in a lower class of our economic sphere, but lower to middle and middle class families who are worried about the increase of health care. Listen, the affordability crisis is taking everybody on right now, and people are just desperate for new solutions, and they're not seeing that in Tallahassee. I agree, we've heard politicians in the past say this is the moment, but the cycle has proven otherwise. This cycle, we're already seeing voters outperform for Democrats by over 15 points right here in the state of Florida.
For more on the race for Florida governor, see all of our coverage at clickorlando.com. Lisa Bell, News 6.